Hey guys, what's going on? And we are back with another Vandalism video. This week I want to discuss piano layering and which modules I use, which brands I use, or which pianos I'm sampling. For example, there's so many different pianos out there. Even if you're playing live piano, that's obviously the best, but we don't all have that at our fingertips. So outside of Nexus, which I know a lot of you use and I've used in the past in other studios, I'm not saying that's a bad option, but I also believe there's so many other modules and companies out there that have good tones and good pianos ready for you. It just really comes down to how you're layering it and how you're balancing each different piano company or module or whatever it may be. So with that being said, I'm just going to go through a few different style processing that I use, a few different pianos that I use inside Kontakt, and see if it'll be a benefit to you, because I really think it'll open your eyes to step outside the box from Nexus or maybe an ordinary piano that you may have been using for so many years now. So let's get right into it. As you guys can see here, I have 4 pianos laid out, all the same chord progression. Some might be sitting in a different octave, a full octave down or up, etc. And then I'm going to show you in a little bit that I have just a layering of a cello and a bass just to give a little bit more thickness so we can feel a little bit more in the layering. But let me play it for you right now so you can know the chord progression. Alright, so that's going to be our chord progression. That is laid out right now with an EXS from Logic. For anybody that's not a Logic user, this is just a sampler. So what this is doing is sampling a Yamaha grand piano, which is legendary. It's very, very nice sounding. It's not as good as playing it live, depending on which room you're recording in with a live piano. It could be better, it could be worse, but luckily we have that sampled here today in Logic, so that's one of the layers I use. Very straightforward. There's nothing over the top about it. It just has a good tone, and it's going to be a good layer to the other piano layers I'm going to put in. And this layer 2 is going to be a way more different kind of exaggerated piano sound. Going back and forth, you can hear the main difference. One is dry and more center, and then one is a little bit more, processed is the word. It's definitely got a lot more going on, which is good. It's good and bad. It also depends on what genre you're working in. Keep that in mind. These little tips that we're going over today might not apply to the specific track you're doing, but you can reapply what we're doing just in a very, very subtle and different way to whatever genre track you're working in. And piano 3. And then piano 4. Alright, so I want to go through each one there. Now that you've heard what they sound like solo, I want to go through why I'm processing each one a certain way. And the cool thing I want to point out is there's so many different ways to do this that, a producer that you talk to tomorrow might have a different technique. And I think that's the fun thing about music production is this technique could be something that you haven't heard before or something you're familiar with, but you also can apply it in different ways, to your track. It's going to be totally different than the track I'm working on, which obviously isn't a full track right now. We're just doing a progression. But you get the point. It's totally going to be up to you and what you do in your track for the processing. But let's go one by one here. That first Yamaha, I just want to point out that I'm doing a mid-side option on it. I'm taking out the lows as far as stereo, and I'm putting them in a mono. So hopefully you're hearing on headphones or monitors where you can really hear that clarity in the left and right. When I'm sweeping this left and right, I want to put the signal of this piano just a little bit further back in the mix, but very, very center, so I can then use piano 2 for this example is going to be that really wide and bright piano, so I don't want too much other piano layers going on in that spectrum. subtle difference of that piano sitting back a little further. And I'm going to cut the lows just a little more. And this would be the stereo. I'm just cutting the lows out of there. And you can see there as we freeze it, that dark gray in the back. And we're getting rid of all of that there, because then when we add in a bass line, of course, depending on where you are in your arrangement of your track, you might want the warmth of that piano. You might want this warmth low end, but I'm picturing this in a breakdown where I'm going to add a bass in to really take up that 200 hertz and down. So I really don't need the pianos having too much going on down there, because you're going to create a lot of mud. So we'll get rid of that. So that's the main, that's main layer 1. Now I'm not doing too much processing to that because I like the tone of the Yamaha. So make sure you find a piano that really fits the style that you want. Really take your time with picking tones, different modules. I know true pianos, if you're a true piano user, they have so many different tones that you can go back and forth and kind of shape the piano, which is super cool because you can get more of a natural play to it and kind of make it come alive. So really take your time choosing piano types. Layer 2, that really exaggerated sound. I'm going to go through the processing now so you can see why I've kind of done that. Let me play that without the processing. It's really hidden. There's nothing to it. So I wanted to make a piano layer that's really exaggerated. You guys can see here how much processing we have, and we'll open that up now to go one by one. First off, I'm rolling off the lows. And then I do a little bit of upward compression to give a little bit more body to it. You can see that really, just pay attention to that mid warmth of the piano. You're really losing it without this plugin. And then the passive EQ to give a little bit more warmth to it. So you can hear in that low mid range, again, we're cutting it off a little bit, but you can hear that slight 200 range, 200 to about 4 range right in here. You're getting that little bit of boost. So there's already 3 plugins that's making this piano sound come alive and be a little bit different, you know. So I'm widening out the mids with the mid side option. This whole middle section of 400 hertz, I'm kind of expanding out because piano 1 is sitting center. Now I can expand this piano to be wider so that they kind of replace each other and kind of feel like one. But obviously this different piano that we're using here in Contact is going to be the wider option. Now I'm putting this on a hard tone. You can put it on softer, but it'll be kind of like the Yamaha tone. It'll be a little bit too soft for me. I kind of want that edge, really edgy sound to it. And to kind of make it pluck a little more, I usually put a little bit of attack on this with a transient designer. Now you want to go to an extreme. This is something I've always done. I take the parameters as far as they'll go, and obviously it sounds very bad to its full extent, and then I kind of dial back a few percentage until it really hits that sweet spot. So that'll give it a little bit of a pluck coming out of the other layers that we're doing in here, in this sequence here. And this is just a little bit of compression. You can see I'm taking out all of this. I'm just compressing really in this signal. This isn't a night and day difference. This is just a little bit of a glued effect. I generally would use a little bit of the universal audio stuff, but I know not everybody has those plugins, so I didn't really want to bring those up today. I wanted to try to use a general plugin that a lot of you guys have, and the C2 here from FabFilter is a really good option for compression. So without those, you can still feel it's losing a little bit of body. And a a little bit of brightness. And lastly, just a tiny bit of the Q2. I know I'm opening a lot of instances of Q2, but I like to visually see the different sections that I'm doing. One of them is going to be mid-side. One will be, you know, I'm just bringing up the stereo and the highs. The other one could be just cutting the lows, etc. I don't like to build them all in one box. I visually like to see every single section if I can. I recommend that you guys do that. If you can pull up every single plugin here at once, and you can kind of see where there's a hole, or maybe there's a section that needs a little bit of brightness, because sometimes you don't want to always trust your ears when you start getting fatigued in the studio. So start trusting multiple analyzers with FabFilter, for example. So to play that back again. And then lastly, the EQ, the reverb I'm putting on this, on bus 1. I'm not usually putting my reverb directly on the channel strip. I usually send it or bus it in this situation. You'll see over here, I have Valhalla pulled up, really wet signal, and I'm just going to adjust the send till I get a little bit of that air in the background of the piano. And you want to be careful with the decay. Decay meaning basically the tail of the reverb. It's going to keep carrying over to the next hits of the piano. Make sure you got to understand that the chords are they going to start piling up with the reverb. So sometimes you want a short decay depending on how your chord progression is played. If it's held out sustained notes, you can do this in a different way. But since we have short chord progression notes, we need to be careful with the decay and be very, very short with it. Because if we carry it over, so you obviously can hear that tail, that's all just going to keep carrying over the entire song and really just start creating mud. So be careful with that, of course. And that applies to synths, any chords, cellos you might be working with, and so on. It really applies to many things. So that's a big difference there. That's giving a little bit of air to it. All right, this one here is my mono piano. I like putting a piano dead center. I know piano 1 we tied in a little bit there to the center, but I like one that's a soft tone. That's kind of be played. It's going to be played very, very soft with a little bit less velocity, and you can see here I have the velocity way down, so the notes are being played very soft, and it's going to act as a mid-range mono piano. And I'm just putting my direction mixer on. You guys can use whatever you may have in your DAW. This is simply taking it from stereo to mono with one click. And then I'm doing a little bit more compression for a little bit more body. And again, cutting the lows because I know I'm bringing in a bass line later. So I want to make sure all the piano lows are cut off. It's very important. And I'm not sending that to anything. That's really just my mono driven piano that's dead center. It's going to have body that's going to be very, very centered in speakers. I don't want it to be wet. You really want piano 2 to be that very, very wet signal. You know, you don't really need too many other piano layers having too much processing as far as reverb and delay. All right, layer 4, the last piano. And you do not have to do, let me point out, you do not have to do this many layers. You might nail it with 1 or 2, depending on what module or what tones you're working with. You know, I've nailed it with 1 piano before and been super happy with the layering. And, you know, as far as what that piano brings to life, I don't need to go further. Sometimes you don't need 4 layers. For this example we did, I feel like we needed to fill it out. And the main thing I want to point out is when I have them all together, playing all at once, all 4, and I start muting one by one, there should be a distinct, you should be able to notice that piano disappearing as you're muting it. If you're not noticing it kind of going away, then it's not doing anything to your mix down. So think about that being subtractive a little bit. You want to take it away if it's not really doing anything. So let's do that now. I'll show you what I mean. So you can hear the piano 1 kind of is changing that mid-range to low notes a little bit. It's very subtle. And piano 2 is very, very apparent. You can tell that's the main layer. And for layer 3, listen dead at center in the speakers. Listen right in that mono area. When we take piano 3 out, we lose that thickness in the center of the speakers. And then piano 4 really kind of, to me, takes the warmth out of it. It kind of takes that mid to low range kind of right out of it, and it feels a little bit too light to me. So that's something super important as you guys are producing. Make sure you're doing that technique of muting your layers one by one to see if they're actually making a difference in your mix, because if you're not really hearing them, they could be kind of just messing up your entire day. They could be, you know, you're sitting there thinking, why is it not clean? What's going on? This layer is so cool when it's soloed, but when I have it in the mix, it's not really doing anything. Well, take it out is my advice. Kind of take it out and start over, or just start minimalizing and simplifying things, and you'll start to clear up your mix. And to add in the cello to give that extra layer, I always have a cello layer, violin, a little bit of strings on top. You can hear that really light top end to it. And let me show you all the processing I did there for the cellos, just so you can get an idea of how light that's sitting. Kind of the same idea applying the processing that I've done in the past. You guys can see that I like reapplying processing, because I don't believe, not that I don't believe, but I don't think you need to always reinvent the wheel when you're processing. You know, if something sounds good with your pianos, try applying that same processing that you just took hours on to the next sound, and then kind of dial in the parameters to fit that specific sound. And that's what I've done for years, and kind of what's been effective. So you can hear without the processing, there's really nothing to that cello string sound. So that's why I went with all of this processing here. Again, the compression. And I'm hiking up that side function, because now cello 1 is gonna tie in with piano 2, that really wide piano we went over. They're going to work together to create that wide feeling, overall spectrum feeling. The song's going to feel wider with those two working together. Since they're two different instruments, it's going to sound very nice together. And the next thing I usually do, with that being said, I'll take piano 2 and cello 1 and bus them to one channel, which we'll do here. You can bus it over to 3, and we'll take cello and bus it over to 3. And now I can actually compress those together. Just put a simple compression on. And I can definitely hear that transient is coming through too much, so we'll dial back. It's a little better. It's just a little less clicky. And last, before we sign off, just add in a bass. You know, take your low notes of your chords and start filling up the low end. Just make sure all your layers that you have there is rolled off enough just to let through this bass line. And that's just a really noise saw bass. That's really it. There's definitely more to piano layering. You can do a lot of things. Be creative with it. But just to show you the night and day difference from all the processing, just so you can hear it, it's definitely a big difference. So there's our starting, you know, kit, you could say. It sounds kind of like, it sounds too dull for me, and I'm sure you agree that it's kind of, there's nothing there. It's a nice piano sound, but there's no separation in layers, and that's when all this processing comes alive. guys. Well, yeah, that's piano layering. We went over a little processing. Hopefully that helps you guys out. Now just reapply this to even synth processing a little bit, and you can dabble with that and kind of figure things out and kind of make things work with the mix down. Just make sure you're rolling pianos off, separating them with mid-side functions, and kind of making sure certain layers you're adding are actually making a difference. That's super important. So check it out, give it a shot, and we'll catch you guys next time.